This video will show you how to replace the controller on your RadCity 5 Plus high step. You will need a flathead screwdriver, flat side cutters, a 2.5mm and 3mm Allen wrench, a T7 and T8 Torx screwdriver, a few zip ties, the replacement controller from RadPower bikes. Bolt head size and style may vary, so use the appropriate tool for your bolts. Start by getting the bike ready for maintenance. Turn off the bike, remove the battery, and press the power button to discharge remaining power. Locate and remove the internal cable cover using your Torx screwdriver. Set the internal cable cover and hardware aside. Remove the battery mount bolts. If the bolts are different from each other, make a point to remember which bolt goes where for the reinstallation process. Set the bolts aside. As you pull the battery mount out of the down tube, unplug the battery connector. Pull both sides apart without twisting and set the battery mount aside. Remove the two bolts on your lock core with your Torx screwdriver and pull the lock core out of the down tube. Set the lock core aside for later. Remove the external cable cover to access the controller mounting bolts. Locate the 4 bolts on the bottom of the down tube and remove them using your 2.5mm Allen wrench. Set the bolts and the cable cover aside. At the bottom of the down tube, snip the zip ties on the motor and wiring harness cables. Then, disconnect the motor cable and wiring harness cable by pulling the ends directly apart. Use your flathead screwdriver to free the grommet from the hole at the bottom of the down tube. Slide the grommet off of the cables and set it aside. Remove the 2 bolts holding the controller in place with your 2.5mm Allen key. Pull the controller out of the down tube and set the bolts aside. Recycle the controller according to local rules. Align the new controller with the controller carrier as shown. If you do not have a controller carrier, you can skip this step. The flat side of the carrier should rest against the bottom of the controller. Attach the 2 bolts to secure the carrier to the controller. When installing the new controller, the carrier will act as a guide, and both parts will be installed together. Place the controller in the battery slot with the bolt holes facing downward. The side with the cables should face toward the back of the bike. Slide the controller up the down tube until the holes on the controller align with the mounting holes in the frame. Secure the controller using your 2.5mm Allen wrench. Push the connector ends of the wiring harness and motor connectors through the hole at the bottom of the down tube so that the connectors hang outside of the frame. Locate the grommet you removed in an earlier step and slide it over both cables. Reseat the grommet in the hole using your flathead screwdriver if needed. Plug in the wiring harness connector and the motor connector at the bottom of the down tube. Line up the internal notches and pins and external arrows and press together without twisting. Connect the controller to the battery mount. Line up the internal notches and pins and external arrows and press together without twisting. Reinstall the battery mount. Installing each bolt into its original position. Do not over-tighten. Reinstall the lock core. Ensure the motor cable, the wiring harness cable, and the battery cable all fit completely under the gap at the bottom of the lock core. Secure with your Torx screwdriver, but do not over-tighten. Reinstall the internal cable cover with your Torx screwdriver. All cables should sit comfortably underneath the cable cover. Tighten securely, but do not over-tighten. Replace any snipped zip ties and use the flat side cutters to snip off zip tie excess. Ensure the cut is flush and smooth with no sharp point. Reinstall the external cable cover. Place the external cable cover in position underneath the frame. Thread in the bolts by hand, starting from the bolt closest to the bottom bracket. Position the wiring harness cable so that it's on the drive side of the bolt holes. Position the shifter and brake cables on the non-drive side of the bolt holes. Use a 2.5mm Allen wrench to evenly tighten the bolts. Do not over-tighten. If the external cable cover does not sit flush against the frame, loosen the bolts 1/2 turn at a time and ensure that no cables are pinched by the cable cover. Tighten all 4 bolts with your Allen wrench. Check that all cables are out of the way of moving parts and turn the handlebar to make sure it can move freely. Install the battery and test the bike fully before riding. Reach out to our product support team if you have any questions, and ride rad!